Reconciliation. Reconciliation is a process, not a destination. It requires hard work and constant effort. Together, in true partnership with First Nation, Inuit, and Métis, we're committed to doing the work and putting in the effort. Because reconciliation isn't just important, it's necessary. As a government, one of our overarching priorities is making sure that every single person in Canada is able to reach their full potential. And that's only possible if we continue to advance reconciliation as true partners. We've been focused on that since we formed government in 2015. Almost immediately, we got to work on making sure every person living on reserve has access to clean drinking water. And we're making real progress. So far, we've lifted 139 long-term drinking water advisories, and we've prevented 251 short-term advisories from becoming long-term. Before we came into office, there were no plans to fix this issue. Now thousands of families have access to clean and safe drinking water. And as I sit here, 31 long-term advisories remain in 27 communities, and in each of those communities, there's a project team and an action plan in place to resolve it. Beyond that, we're also making progress in other areas, including the environment. Indigenous peoples have been caring for the lands and waters that surround us since time immemorial. They have unique relationships with nature and knowledge that is invaluable. That's why we're working with Indigenous guardians who are stepping up to protect and conserve ecosystems. It's also why we're providing Indigenous nations, communities, and organizations with the support they need to deliver natural climate solutions. And why we're working with partners to establish Indigenous protected and conserved areas. We're also working to address historical wrongs. For decades, more than 300,000 First Nations children and families have been waiting for the recognition of the harms done to them through discriminatory practices of First Nations Child and Family Services and the narrow application of the Jordan's Principle. This year, to compensate them for that discriminatory underfunding, we reached a final settlement agreement totaling more than $23 billion. Now, the process is not done yet, and there is more work to do, but this is an important and meaningful step in advancing reconciliation and healing. First Nation, Inuit, and Métis children deserve to grow up in their community, to be immersed in their culture, and to be surrounded by their loved ones. We're working together to make sure they can. The agreement we signed with Cowessess First Nation and the Government of Saskatchewan 2 years ago is an example of that work. It was the first agreement under the Act respecting First Nations, Inuit, and Métis children, youth, and families that we co-developed with Indigenous partners, and it means that Cowessess First Nation will be able to make their own decisions about what's best for their children and their families. We're also working with Indigenous communities to invest in housing, to build schools, and more. Our government has invested in more than 190 school infrastructure projects in First Nations communities across the country. One of them is a new school in Moosomin First Nation. It's going to give students from kindergarten through grade 12 a safe place to learn, and that, in turn, is going to give them the best possible start in life. Our work together extends into healthcare, too, because unfortunately, Indigenous peoples continue to face gaps in care at every level of the healthcare system. That just isn't acceptable. Not in Canada, not in 2023. So one of the things we're doing is introducing the new Indigenous Health Equity Fund. It's going to directly support First Nation, Métis, and Inuit priorities and approaches. It's going to improve health outcomes, and it's going to be designed and implemented in partnership with Indigenous leadership. In other words, Indigenous communities will be able to respond to unique health needs in ways that work best for them. And when it comes to public safety, we're focused on enhancing and expanding Indigenous-led approaches too. This includes self-administered policing services. Last fall, for example, we announced that a First Nations police service will take over responsibility for policing the Siksika Nation, which is the second largest reserve in Canada. This transition to a self-administered police service is the first in Canada in 14 years. We're on the right path, and we're moving in the right direction. But if you look at the history of this country, that hasn't always been the case. The truth is, our system has long failed Indigenous peoples. For decades, Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQI+ peoples have gone missing, suffered violence, or been murdered, with little or no action on the government's part. We knew that needed to change, and we've taken action to make that change. We released the federal pathway 2 years ago and outlined the work we'll do with families, survivors, organizations, and Indigenous leaders to end the systemic racism and sexism that has enabled and perpetuated this national tragedy. That work is ongoing, and our commitment to seeing it through is unwavering. Of course, we can't talk about reconciliation without talking about residential schools. Residential schools were places of terror and sources of trauma. They were built as places where Indigenous children would be forced to assimilate, and where they would have taken from them their language, their culture, their spirituality, their traditions, and their identity. For far too many, it was a place they would never come home from. It's in their memory, and thanks to the courage of their families and the strength of survivors, that we're moving forward. And to those who say the path forward must include real action, we hear you. To make sure there is justice for the children who never made it home, we've appointed a special interlocutor. She's working with Indigenous leaders, communities, survivors, families, and experts on the treatment and protection of unmarked graves and burial sites of children at former residential schools. We're also supporting community-led processes and research to locate burial sites, and we're providing funding for mental health, cultural, and emotional supports for survivors and families. This is not easy work, and it is not quick work, but it is important work. Over the years, we've also witnessed a number of historic moments. Last year, we installed the survivors' flag on Parliament Hill. By flying this flag, we're saying that we will always remember what happened at residential schools and that we will continue to listen to survivors. We're also dedicating a national monument to honor survivors and all those who never came home from residential schools. This national monument will be located at the West Block Terrace on Parliament Hill, a publicly accessible, highly visible place responding to Call to Action 81. It'll ensure that Indigenous and non-Indigenous people can come together to grieve, to heal, and to learn. Last year, our government appointed the Honourable Michelle O'Bonsawin to the Supreme Court of Canada. An accomplished jurist and widely respected member of Canada's legal community, she is an Abenaki member of the Odanak First Nation, and she is the first Indigenous person to ever serve on Canada's highest court. We also introduced and passed the Indigenous Languages Act and created the country's first ever Office of the Commissioner of Indigenous Languages. We share the same goal as the Commissioner and the directors. We want to protect and promote Indigenous languages. And we'll do that together by creating records, starting immersion programs, supporting cultural activities, and more. We're also focused on advancing the implementation of modern treaties. Our government recently signed a treaty with Whitecap Dakota First Nation, which acknowledged the First Nations' inherent right to self-governance and formally recognized the community as Indigenous Peoples of Canada under the Constitution, a recognition they've been denied for far too long. As the chief of Whitecap, Dakota, Darcy Bear, said after signing this historic treaty, this is reconciliation. Another historic milestone on our collective journey of reconciliation was the passing of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. Part of the Act includes the co-development of an action plan that addresses injustices, eliminates discrimination and racism against Indigenous peoples, and promotes mutual respect and understanding. The Act must also make sure that federal laws are consistent with UNDRIP. After consulting with Indigenous peoples, we've introduced that action plan, and we're committed to carrying out the work that's needed. Like I've always said, no relationship is more important to our government than the one with Indigenous peoples. The scope and the breadth of everything I just outlined speaks to our commitment to advancing reconciliation, and we'll continue to move forward on this journey together as partners. These aren't just buzzwords or slogans. As we've been doing, we'll back these words up with meaningful actions and concrete results. And we'll keep building a better future for and with Indigenous peoples right across this country.